The late afternoon sun shimmered over the still pool water. A soft breeze carried the sound of distant laughter from the children's playground. Jordan sat back on the lounge chair, a cold glass of lemonade in one hand and a book in the other. For the first time in weeks, he felt at peace. Work had been intense, and this little moment of calm felt well-earned. He leaned back, letting the warmth of the sun soak in, unaware that this quiet day was about to change everything. The peace broke with the sound of firm footsteps on the concrete. Jordan lifted his eyes from his book. A woman in her 50s, dressed neatly with big sunglasses and a confident stride, was walking directly toward him. Her face showed a mix of confusion and something sharper, suspicion. "Excuse me," she said, standing over him. "Do you live here?" Her tone was not curious, it was accusing. Jordan blinked, caught off guard. "Yes, I do," he said calmly, sitting up straighter. "Really? I've never seen you before," she pressed. "Are you sure you're not visiting someone?" A few heads turned nearby. Jordan felt all eyes on him. He tried to keep his voice even. "I'm sure. Apartment 304, been here for 2 years." She frowned as if the answer wasn't enough. "Then you should have your key card." "Let's see it." Jordan felt his chest tighten. The audacity of the demand stung. Still, he stayed composed. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I'm not obligated to show you anything. If you have an issue, you can call management." Her cheeks flushed red. "I will," she snapped. "I'm calling security right now." She pulled out her phone, making sure everyone could hear. A few neighbors peeked over from their chairs, whispering. Some even started recording. Sensing something was about to unfold, Jordan leaned back, silent, refusing to give her the reaction she seemed to want. Within minutes, a young security guard appeared at the gate, clearly unsure what he was walking into. The woman waved him over eagerly. "Officer, thank goodness." "This man refuses to leave. He says he lives here, but I've never seen him before." The guard approached Jordan. "Sir, may I see your key card?" Jordan sighed, reached for his wallet and pulled out both his key card and driver's license. "Here you go," he said calmly. The guard checked, then nodded. "It matches the address." "He's a resident." The woman's mouth fell open. "You can't be serious," she said, voice trembling with anger. "You're just taking his word for it?" The guard shook his head. "Ma'am, he showed proof." There's nothing more to discuss. The crowd around the pool stirred. Some people whispered, others nodded approvingly. Jordan thought it was over, until another voice rose from the corner. "Enough," said an older woman in a floral sundress. She stood up slowly, her tone firm but calm. "This isn't the first time this has happened." The woman accusing Jordan froze. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, don't act innocent," the older woman said. "You've harassed delivery drivers, new residents, and even college kids. And now this. It's embarrassing." The air went still. People looked at one another. A few began nodding. Someone even clapped softly. The younger woman's confidence melted away. Her hands shook slightly as she grabbed her bag. Without another word, she turned and walked out, her face red with shame. The crowd began to disperse, but one resident had recorded the entire thing. By that evening, the video was online. The caption read, "This just happened at Magnolia Creek. When will this stop?" By morning, it had gone viral. News outlets began calling it the poolside incident. Jordan's calm reaction and the older woman's courage became a symbol of dignity and truth. The apartment management called both of them into the office. The manager, a kind woman named Miss Delgado, looked serious. "We've seen the video," she said. "This behavior is unacceptable. Deborah, you've been warned before. This stops now." The woman tried to defend herself. "I was just protecting the community." Miss Delgado's tone didn't change. "That's not your job. And it's not protection when it's built on prejudice." Jordan sat quietly, watching as the woman deflated in her seat. When it was over, she stormed out and he simply nodded, thanking the manager for handling it fairly. Within days, Magnolia Creek started changing. People began talking more openly about what had happened. The management organized small meetings about respect and understanding. Neighbors who barely spoke before started greeting each other. The once tense atmosphere softened. Weeks later, Jordan hosted a small community barbecue. There was laughter, music, and the smell of grilled food in the air. Children played while adults chatted comfortably. The older woman from that day, Eleanor, sat nearby with a plate of cookies. As Jordan handed out plates, he noticed Deborah walk by quietly. For a brief moment, their eyes met. She gave a small, hesitant nod, an apology without words. Jordan returned a simple nod, accepting it. The sun dipped below the trees and soft light spread across the courtyard. The sound of laughter echoed between the apartment buildings. For the first time, Magnolia Creek truly felt like a community. Sometimes change doesn't come from anger or loud fights. It starts with calm, courage, and kindness. What happened that day at the pool didn't just expose one woman's prejudice. It reminded everyone that humanity still exists, and grace is stronger than hate. And as Jordan looked around at his neighbors, smiling, he knew this wasn't just his home anymore. It was everyone's. The woman's voice echoed across the pool area, sharp enough to break the peace that had hung in the air just moments before. A few people turned their heads, pretending not to stare, but their curiosity was obvious. The sound of splashing water faded, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. Jordan sat up a little straighter, his book now closed on his lap. The woman stood only a few feet away, arms crossed, sunglasses glinting in the sunlight. Her posture screamed authority, or at least the kind of authority that some people give themselves without earning it. "I asked if you live here," she repeated, her tone even harder now, "because I've lived in this community for over 10 years and I know everyone." Jordan met her gaze calmly. "Well, you don't know me," he said softly, "but that doesn't mean I don't belong." Her lips tightened. "I just find it strange that I've never seen you before. Usually only residents are allowed at the pool." He tilted his head, trying not to let her words sink too deep. "I am a resident," he said evenly. "Apartment 304. She didn't even glance toward the building, as if she didn't believe him. "Then show me your keycard," she demanded. "If you really live here, it shouldn't be a problem." Jordan took a breath, trying to keep his voice level. "Ma'am," he said, "I don't have to prove anything to you. If you think there's a problem, you can talk to management." That should have ended it. But instead her expression darkened. "So you don't have your card with you?" "I knew it." He sighed and leaned back in his chair, staring at the pool instead of her. "I didn't say that," he replied quietly. "I said you're not the one who needs to check it." A couple sitting nearby exchanged a look. A young woman whispered something to her partner, who frowned but didn't say anything. A man at the far end of the pool adjusted his sunglasses, pretending to scroll on his phone while recording. The woman planted her hands on her hips. "You know what? I'm calling security. Let's see what they think about this." She turned away, pulling her phone from her bag and walking a few steps off, her voice raised enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, there's someone here who doesn't belong." "No, I don't think he's a resident. Please send someone now." Jordan closed his eyes for a moment, trying to block out the sting of embarrassment. He wasn't angry, and not yet, but the weight of judgment pressed down like a heavy stone. He could feel the attention of strangers around him, the whispers, the quiet tension in the air. A little boy splashed nearby, his mother quickly pulling him closer and whispering something. The sound of running water from the nearby fountain filled the silence between words. Jordan sat still, holding on to his calm like it was the only thing he had control over. The woman turned back toward him, phone still in hand. "You could have avoided all of this," she said smugly, "if you had just shown me your keycard." Jordan looked up, his tone steady but firm. "And you could have avoided embarrassing yourself if you'd minded your own business." Her mouth fell open slightly, as if no one had ever spoken to her like that. She hesitated, then muttered under her breath, "People like you think you can do whatever you want." The words hit him like a quiet slap. He felt his heartbeat quicken but forced himself not to react. He simply turned his gaze back to the pool. There was a long pause, the kind that makes the air heavy. The woman shifted uncomfortably, glancing around to see if anyone agreed with her. But no one did. The only sound was the faint hum of the wind moving through the trees. Moments later, the gate creaked open. A young security guard stepped in, holding a small clipboard and looking uncertain. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked politely. The woman immediately rushed forward. "Thank goodness you're here," she said, pointing at Jordan. "He's been sitting here all afternoon. Says he lives here, but I've never seen him before. Refuses to show proof. I'm just trying to protect the property." Jordan stayed seated. His calmness stood in stark contrast to her restless energy. "I do live here," he said plainly. "Apartment 304. You can check with the office." The guard looked between them, unsure who to believe. "Sir, do you have your key card with you?" Jordan nodded, reached into his wallet and handed it over. The guard scanned it with his device, then checked the name. Everything matches, he said after a moment. He's a resident. The woman blinked as if the words didn't make sense. That can't be right, she said. You must have made a mistake. The guard straightened. Ma'am, there's no mistake. He lives here. The pool area fell silent again. A few neighbors murmured softly. The young couple who'd been watching earlier exchanged a small smile. Someone even whispered, "Good for him." The woman's face flushed red. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I was just trying to help." Jordan stood, his voice calm but powerful. "You weren't helping," he said. "You were assuming." The woman's hand trembled slightly as she clutched her phone. Her confidence was fading fast. She turned to leave, muttering something about calling the manager. But before she could, a quiet yet firm voice rose from behind the crowd. "Enough," the voice said. Everyone turned to see an older woman standing up from a chair near the fence. Her expression was steady, her eyes sharp. She'd been watching the whole time, and the look on her face made even the loud woman pause. That single word, enough, carried more power than any argument. And in that moment, the balance shifted. Enough. The word sliced through the air like a sudden crack of thunder. Every head turned toward the voice. Near the far corner of the pool, a woman in her 60s stood slowly from her lounge chair. Her gray hair caught the sunlight, and her calm, steady expression demanded silence. She wasn't angry, just deeply tired of what she'd witnessed. Her floral sundress swayed slightly in the wind as she took a few steps forward. The accusing woman froze, her earlier confidence faltering. Excuse me?" she stammered, clutching her phone tightly. "I said enough," the older woman repeated, her tone firm but controlled. "This has gone on long enough. Everyone here can see what's happening, and it's not right." The pool area fell completely silent. Even the children had stopped splashing. The air was thick with tension. Jordan remained standing, watching quietly. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The older woman stopped beside the security guard and looked directly at the accuser. "This isn't the first time you've done something like this, is it?" The woman blinked, taken aback. I don't know what you're talking about," she said defensively. "Oh, don't pretend," the older woman said, her voice calm but sharp. "You've made a habit of this. Everyone here knows. The delivery driver last month, remember him? You said he was loitering because he sat in his truck for a lunch break. And those college kids moving in? You called the police because they looked suspicious." A murmur spread through the crowd. Some nodded, others whispered to each other, recalling the incidents. The accuser's posture stiffened as her face turned red. "That's not fair," she said, her voice rising. "I was just trying to protect the community." The older woman shook her head. "Protect the community from what? From people you don't recognize? From anyone who doesn't fit your picture of who belongs here?" The words hit like quiet blows, each one cutting through the shallow excuses. The guard shifted awkwardly, unsure whether to stay or step away. The accuser opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. "You embarrassed yourself today," the older woman continued, "and you embarrassed the rest of us too. Magnolia Creek is supposed to be a home, not a place where we size people up and question who deserves to exist in peace." Someone near the pool clapped once, just once, but it broke the tension. Another joined in, then another. Within seconds, the air filled with soft, approving applause. It wasn't loud or mocking. It was gentle, honest, like the sound of people finally agreeing on something that should have been obvious all along. The woman's lips trembled. She looked around at the faces watching her, the very neighbors she wanted to impress, and realized none of them were on her side. The confidence she'd worn like armor began to crack. "This is absurd," she muttered, shaking her head. "I'm leaving." She gathered her things in a rush, her sunglasses slipping down her nose, and turned toward the gate. For a moment she hesitated, as if hoping someone might defend her. No one did. Then she walked out, the metal gate closing with a soft clang that echoed through the still air. Silence lingered for a few seconds after she left. The older woman, Eleanor, as a few people whispered her name, exhaled softly, the firmness in her shoulders easing. She turned to Jordan and said gently, "I'm sorry you had to go through that. None of this was your fault." Jordan gave a small smile. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I appreciate you speaking up." Eleanor nodded. "Someone had to," she said. "Too many people stand by when they should say something." A few neighbors stepped closer now. One man in his 40s offered Jordan a handshake. "I'm glad you handled it the way you did," he said. "Most people wouldn't have stayed that calm." Jordan smiled politely. "Getting angry wouldn't have changed her mind," he replied. The security guard, clearly embarrassed by how things had unfolded, gave a small nod of apology. "Sorry for the trouble, sir," he said. "If there's anything management can do, I'll make sure they know." Jordan thanked him, then sat down again, though this time it didn't feel the same. The peace he'd felt earlier had been replaced with something heavier. Not anger, but sadness. Still beneath it all, there was relief. Someone had seen what happened, and someone had cared enough to speak up. Eleanor walked back to her chair but didn't sit down right away. She looked around at the crowd, the same neighbors who'd watched quietly moments before. "Let's do better," she said softly. "All of us." Her words hung in the air like sunlight after a storm. Slowly, people began returning to their seats. Conversation starting again, though quieter, more thoughtful. As the crowd thinned, Jordan looked across the pool and saw a young man on his phone clearly typing something. He didn't think much of it, not yet. But within hours, that small action would make what happened today known far beyond the gates of Magnolia Creek. By the time the sun dipped below the buildings and the pool lights flickered on, the video was already making its way through social media. A caption read, "This happened today at Magnolia Creek. When will this stop?" Jordan had no idea that the simple act of sitting by the pool and the courage of one elderly neighbor was about to ripple far beyond this quiet apartment complex and spark a conversation that would reach the world. By evening, the sky over Magnolia Creek glowed orange and pink. The pool water shimmered with fading sunlight, but the air around the complex felt different, heavier somehow, charged with whispers. People passed one another in the walkways with quiet looks that said, "Did you see it? And can you believe what happened?" In apartment 304, Jordan sat on his couch staring at his phone. The video had already reached thousands of views. A neighbor named Lucas, the young man from earlier, had posted it online with a simple caption. "This just happened at Magnolia Creek. When will this stop?" Jordan watched the video in silence. He saw himself sitting by the pool, calm but clearly uncomfortable, and the woman, Deborah, standing over him, her words filled with suspicion. Then came Eleanor's voice, strong and unwavering, shutting everything down with that single word. Enough. He didn't feel proud or triumphant watching it. Mostly he felt tired. But as he scrolled through the comments, something began to shift inside him. There were hundreds of messages from strangers, people thanking him for staying calm, for handling the situation with grace, for showing what quiet strength looked like. Others shared their own stories, moments when they'd been judged unfairly, moments they wished they'd spoken up like Eleanor had. Outside his apartment, footsteps echoed in the hallway. He could hear neighbors talking in hushed voices. The incident had shaken everyone, and by nightfall it was all anyone could talk about. Meanwhile, in another corner of the complex, Deborah sat alone on her balcony. Her phone buzzed nonstop, notifications, calls, messages. She had become the face of something she didn't understand or maybe didn't want to. The video was spreading fast, faster than she could process. For the first time, she saw herself through the eyes of others. The way she'd spoken, her tone, her assumptions, it all looked ugly now, reflected back at her through 1,000 screens. The next morning, Magnolia Creek's leasing office was buzzing. Miss Delgado, the property manager, had already seen the video. She watched it twice, once as a manager, once as a person. By the end of it, she sighed heavily, picked up her phone, and made 2 calls. One to Deborah, one to Jordan. When Jordan arrived, the air in the small conference room was thick with awkward silence. Deborah sat at the far end of the table, her sunglasses resting on the desk even though they were indoors. Her posture was stiff, defensive. Miss Delgado entered holding a tablet with the video paused on the screen. She placed it in front of them and said quietly, "I think we all know why we're here." No one spoke. The faint hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. "I've watched the video," Miss Delgado continued, "and I've reviewed the previous complaints we've received, Deborah. This isn't the first time." Deborah shifted in her seat. "I was just trying to protect the community," she said weakly. "You can't blame me for being cautious." Miss Delgado's tone stayed calm, but her eyes were firm. "Caution is one thing. Harassment is another. You don't get to decide who belongs here. That's our job and his home. She gestured toward Jordan. You caused unnecessary distress to someone who was simply living his life. Deborah swallowed hard, her voice shaking. It wasn't my intention. Miss Delgado leaned forward. Intentions don't erase the impact. The room went still. Even the air seemed to pause. Deborah lowered her gaze, her earlier pride gone. Jordan finally spoke, his voice soft but steady. I don't want to make this worse for anyone, he said. I just want to live here peacefully like everyone else. Miss Delgado nodded. And you will. Deborah, this is an official warning. Any further incidents of this kind will result in termination of your lease. For a moment, no one moved. Then Deborah stood abruptly, mumbling something about being misunderstood, and left the room without looking back. When the door closed, the silence lingered. Miss Delgado turned to Jordan and sighed. I'm truly sorry for what happened, she said. No one should ever have to experience that here. If there's anything we can do to make you feel safer, please let me know. Jordan nodded. Thank you. Honestly, I just hope this helps things change. He left the office quietly, but as he stepped outside, something caught his attention. Two neighbors standing by the courtyard stopped talking when they saw him. One of them smiled awkwardly, then said, Hey, I just wanted to say, that shouldn't have happened to you. We're glad you live here. It was a small moment, but it meant something. By that afternoon, the video had crossed 500,000 views, then 1 million, then 2. News channels began calling it the Magnolia Creek Pool Incident. Reporters wanted interviews, talk shows wanted statements, and hashtags flooded social media. Jordan Harris, Call Out Karen, Freakidu, Magnolia Creek. For every hateful comment online, there were 100 messages of support. People from around the country shared how this story opened conversations in their own families, workplaces, and schools. What had started as one woman's act of judgment had turned into a global discussion about empathy and respect. That evening, Jordan sat again by the same pool. The water rippled under the warm glow of the lights. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking in the quiet. Eleanor appeared beside him, her familiar voice breaking the silence. Quite a day, huh? He smiled slightly. More than I expected. She chuckled softly. The world moves fast when truth finally gets a spotlight. He nodded. I just hope people don't forget the lesson once the views go away. Eleanor looked out at the pool, her reflection trembling in the water. Change doesn't happen overnight, she said. But sometimes one story is enough to start it. Jordan glanced at her, grateful for her calm wisdom. The night air was cooler now, softer. Around them, the complex was quiet. The same place as before, yet completely changed. The next morning, Jordan's phone buzzed again. This time, not with outrage or sympathy, but with invitations. News stations, podcasts, even a local school wanted him to speak about what happened. He didn't know what to say yet, but one thing was clear. His story wasn't just his anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been judged unfairly and stayed silent, and so, the man who only wanted to read by the pool found himself at the center of something much bigger. A story about courage, grace, and the power of one simple word that changed everything. Enough. Within days, Jordan's life transformed in ways he could never have imagined. What began as an uncomfortable poolside confrontation was now on every major platform. News anchors discussed it. Podcasts analyzed it. Talk shows debated it. The words Magnolia Creek became a symbol of something much larger than an apartment complex. It became a mirror reflecting how people treated one another. Jordan's phone buzzed nonstop. His inbox overflowed with messages, strangers thanking him for his calmness, old friends reaching out with pride, even people he didn't know, sharing how his story gave them courage to speak up about their own experiences. But along with the praise came pressure. Interviews, requests, opinions from people who only knew a minute of his life, but now felt entitled to his thoughts. At first, he didn't know how to respond. He hadn't asked for any of this. He had just wanted peace. But now that the world was watching, he realized silence wasn't an option. Not anymore. One morning, a call came from a popular national talk show. The host, known for highlighting stories of grace and human resilience, wanted Jordan to come on air. He hesitated, unsure if he wanted that kind of attention. But Eleanor, his quiet neighbor-turned-friend, gave him a gentle nudge. Sometimes the right story, told at the right time, she said, can change more than just minds. It can change hearts, Jordan smiled softly.
All right, he said.
Let's do it. The following week, he found himself sitting under bright studio lights facing the cameras. The host greeted him warmly, and the crowd applauded as he took his seat. Clips from the Magnolia Creek video played on a large screen behind them. The host leaned forward and asked, "When she accused you, what went through your mind?" Jordan took a deep breath. "Honestly?" "At first, disbelief," he said. "Then sadness. Because I realized it wasn't just about me. It was about what people choose to see when they look at someone they don't understand." The audience listened in silence. His tone wasn't angry or dramatic. It was thoughtful, grounded, sincere. "I didn't want to fight hate with hate," he continued. "I just wanted to show that you can stand your ground with dignity. Sometimes silence and calm say more than shouting ever could." The host nodded. "You handled it with incredible grace," she said. "You gave the world an example of how to respond to prejudice without losing yourself." When the interview aired, it went viral all over again. Clips flooded social media, and hashtags like Tyron Grace Under Pressure and Tyron Be Like Jordan trended for days. People shared quotes from his segment, calling it the calm that sparked a storm. But while Jordan's story inspired many, not everyone was celebrating. Deborah's name, once just another neighbor at Magnolia Creek, was now infamous. Her face had appeared in every article, every discussion. Her actions were dissected publicly, and though the world didn't know her personally, she became a symbol of the judgment people were tired of seeing. At first, she tried to defend herself online, claiming the video was taken out of context. But the more she spoke, the worse it got. Eventually, she deleted her accounts and disappeared from social media entirely. The leasing office confirmed she had stopped attending community events and rarely left her apartment. Some residents said they'd seen her sitting on her balcony at night, quiet, lost in thought. Eleanor, ever the peacemaker, mentioned her one afternoon. "Maybe this will teach her something," she said softly, handing Jordan a plate of cookies. "But you know, people don't change through punishment, they change through reflection." Jordan nodded. "I hope she does reflect. For her sake and for others." The story continued to evolve. Schools used the video in classroom discussions about bias and understanding. A university reached out to Jordan, asking him to speak at a student seminar on empathy and community. Though nervous, he agreed. Standing at the podium weeks later, he looked out at the sea of young faces and said, "This isn't about calling people out. It's about calling people in, to listen, to think, and to do better next time." The crowd applauded, not out of pity, but out of respect. Back at Magnolia Creek, change was visible. The once quiet hallways buzzed with new energy. Neighbors who used to avoid eye contact now stopped to chat. The management launched community programs, potlucks, open forums, even weekend gatherings where residents could share stories about their cultures, families, and journeys. Walls that had silently divided people began to come down. One Saturday afternoon, a mural appeared near the pool, painted by local artists and residents together. It showed two hands, one dark, one light, holding each other over rippling blue water. Beneath it were three simple words, "We belong here." Jordan stood before it, feeling something warm rise in his chest. Eleanor joined him, her expression proud but peaceful. "It's beautiful," she said. He nodded. "It's more than art," he replied quietly. "It's a reminder." The mural became a symbol of the change Magnolia Creek had embraced, a change born from conflict but nurtured through understanding. The incident that once divided them now connected them in ways none of them had expected. As the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, Jordan sat by the pool again, the same spot where it all began. The sound of laughter drifted through the air, not sharp or awkward this time, but warm and natural. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking in the sound. The world outside Magnolia Creek still argued, still judged, still misunderstood. But here, in this small corner of Austin, something had shifted. Something real. Something lasting. Jordan opened his eyes and watched the light flicker across the water. Eleanor's voice echoed faintly in his mind. Sometimes the right story told at the right time can change hearts. And he realized maybe that was his purpose all along. Not to go viral. Not to be famous. But to remind people that kindness isn't weakness and it's strength. The weeks that followed felt like a new chapter for Magnolia Creek. The air itself seemed different, lighter somehow, as if the buildings had exhaled after holding their breath for too long. The pool, once the scene of tension and whispers, had become a gathering place again. Laughter returned. Children played freely. Neighbors who once kept to themselves now stopped to talk, sharing smiles and stories. Jordan noticed the change each day as he walked to his apartment. People who had once avoided eye contact now greeted him with warmth. A wave here, a good morning there, and small gestures that meant everything. For the first time, Magnolia Creek actually felt like the community it had always claimed to be. Eleanor was at the heart of it all. She'd become something of a quiet leader in the complex, organizing small gatherings, encouraging residents to share their stories, and gently reminding everyone that healing takes time. She often said, "Community isn't built in meetings, it's built in moments." One Friday evening, she knocked on Jordan's door holding a clipboard. "We're planning a little event next weekend," she said, smiling. "A barbecue for everyone. Food, music, conversation, no speeches, no tension. Just people being people again. You in?" Jordan hesitated, remembering how the pool had once been the center of his humiliation. But then he saw Eleanor's hopeful smile. "Yeah," he said softly. "I'm in." Word spread quickly. Flyers appeared on bulletin boards. Emails went out to residents, and by the following Saturday, the courtyard was alive. Music drifted from a small speaker. The scent of grilled food filled the air, and the sound of laughter echoed through the complex. Children ran across the grass. Neighbors shared dishes from their cultures, and people mingled in ways that felt new but natural. Jordan manned the grill, flipping burgers with an easy rhythm. He couldn't help but notice how different it all felt now. The same place, but a completely different energy. Eleanor moved gracefully between groups, making sure everyone felt included. She stopped by Jordan's table and grinned. "See," she said. "This is how you build bridges, one plate at a time." He laughed. "You were right," he admitted. "I didn't think it would actually feel this good." The event carried on into the evening, the golden light of sunset washing everything in a warm glow. People who had barely spoken before now sat side by side, talking like old friends. Stories were shared about work, family, dreams, and even regrets. As Jordan passed out plates, he noticed someone standing quietly at the edge of the courtyard. Deborah. She wasn't wearing sunglasses this time. Her posture was smaller, less sure. She clutched a small container in her hands as if debating whether to approach. Some people noticed her but didn't say anything. The music played on. Jordan met her eyes across the crowd. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she took a slow step forward. The chatter softened around them, as if everyone felt the shift in the air. When she finally reached him, she spoke quietly. "I brought something," she said, holding out the container. "Potato salad." "My mother's recipe." Jordan blinked, surprised but calm. He took the container gently from her hands. "Thank you," he said. She nodded, her voice trembling slightly. "I know sorry doesn't fix everything," she whispered. "But I wanted to try. I've had a lot of time to think. What I did that day, it wasn't about you. It was about me, my fear, my assumptions. I thought I was protecting something, but I was really just showing how small my world had become." Jordan didn't interrupt. He just listened, his expression soft but unreadable. Deborah took a shaky breath. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said. "I just want to say thank you for how you handled it. You didn't shout. You didn't humiliate me. You gave me space to see myself clearly. And that's something I'll never forget." For a long moment, Jordan said nothing. Then he gave a small nod. "We all learn things the hard way," he said. "What matters is what we do next." Her eyes filled with quiet relief, and she gave a small, grateful smile before stepping away. Eleanor, who had been watching from a distance, approached after Deborah left. "That," she said softly, "was bigger than any apology could ever be." Jordan nodded. "Maybe this is how healing starts," he replied. As the night deepened, string lights flickered to life around the courtyard. People gathered in small circles, sharing food and laughter. Someone began strumming a guitar. The music blended with the hum of conversation, creating a rhythm that felt alive and hopeful. Eleanor sat nearby with a cup of lemonade, watching the scene unfold with quiet pride. "You know," she said to Jordan, "this whole thing, it didn't break us. It made us see each other again." Jordan smiled. "It made us remember what community really means." Across the courtyard, Deborah sat on a bench alone, watching everyone with a thoughtful expression. She wasn't the center of attention anymore, and maybe that was the best thing for her. She looked smaller now, but in a way that felt real, human, humbled. Later that night, as the crowd began to thin, Jordan stood on the patio looking out at the emptying courtyard. Plates were stacked, lights twinkled, and soft music still played in the background. He thought about how everything had started. One question, one confrontation, one painful misunderstanding, and how it had led to this. Magnolia Creek wasn't perfect. It probably never would be, but it had changed. The people had changed, and that was enough. He turned to see Eleanor approaching with her familiar gentle smile. "You did something special here," she said. "You could have walked away, but instead you helped turn it into something better." Jordan shook his head. "We all did," he said. "Even her in her own way," Eleanor chuckled. "Maybe so. Life's funny like that. Sometimes the worst moments end up building the strongest bridges." The two of them stood in comfortable silence, listening to the faint sounds of laughter still echoing through the complex. The night air was cool, carrying with it the scent of grilled food and something else. Hope. For the first time since that day at the pool, Jordan felt completely at peace. The world outside still had its problems. But here in this small corner of Austin, people were learning, growing, changing. And in that quiet moment under the string lights, it no longer felt like a story about confrontation. It felt like a story about connection. Months passed, and the story that had once set the internet on fire slowly began to fade from the headlines. The hashtag stopped trending, the talk shows moved on to new stories, and the viral video was buried under fresh waves of content. But while the world forgot, Magnolia Creek didn't. The quiet apartment complex that had once been just another name on a map had become something else entirely, a symbol of growth, change, and second chances. The ripples from that single afternoon by the pool were still spreading, even if no one could see them anymore. The community had transformed. The annual summer barbecue became a tradition, a celebration not just of food and music but of unity. The mural near the pool, painted by residents of all ages, stood as a reminder of everything they'd learned. The two hands reaching across the rippling blue water still caught the sunlight each morning, their message simple but powerful. We belong here. Jordan often passed that mural on his morning walks to work. He had returned to his quiet routines, long days at his software job, evenings reading on his balcony, but something inside him had changed. The man who once preferred solitude now found himself saying hello to neighbors, attending gatherings, and offering help when someone new moved in. It wasn't just about being seen anymore. It was about seeing others. Eleanor, ever the heart of Magnolia Creek, had become his closest friend. They met for coffee on weekends, sat under the oak trees near the pool, and talked about everything from life to literature to the strange beauty of human behavior. She always had a quiet wisdom that grounded him. One Saturday morning, as they watched children splashing in the pool, Eleanor smiled softly and said, "You know, sometimes I think that woman did us all a favor." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "That's one way to look at it," she chuckled. "Well, think about it. If that confrontation hadn't happened, maybe we'd still be walking past each other pretending to be strangers. Maybe this place would still be just another collection of walls and doors instead of a community." He thought for a moment, then nodded. "You're right. Sometimes good things grow from the messiest soil." Eleanor's smile deepened. "Exactly. Change isn't comfortable, it never is. But it's necessary." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of laughter nearby. A few children ran past, chasing a ball. One of them tripped, and Jordan instinctively rushed forward, helping the boy to his feet. The child grinned, brushing off his knees. "Thanks, mister." Jordan smiled back, realizing how natural it felt now to care for people he barely knew. Months ago, he might have kept to himself, too afraid to stand out or be misunderstood. But that day at the pool had changed more than his life. It had reshaped how he saw the world around him. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to set, Jordan sat by the pool again. The same chair, the same peaceful view, but a completely different feeling. The reflection of the sky danced on the water's surface, the same place that had once carried tension, now radiating calm. He thought about Deborah. She still lived at Magnolia Creek, though she kept to herself. He'd see her sometimes walking her dog early in the morning or tending to her plants on her balcony. They rarely spoke, but when they did cross paths, she'd nod, a silent acknowledgement of shared history and perhaps quiet gratitude. It wasn't forgiveness in words, but an understanding. Some things don't need to be said. As the sky darkened, the pool lights flickered on, casting soft golden ripples across the water. Jordan took a slow breath, feeling the peace settle in. Everything that had once felt heavy now felt lighter. He remembered the chaos, the headlines, the arguments online. He remembered the fear that day, the judgment in her eyes, and the courage in Eleanor's voice. And then he remembered the applause, that single, powerful moment when a community had chosen truth over silence. He realized then that what happened wasn't just a confrontation. It was a reflection of something much deeper. It wasn't just about one woman's mistake. It was about the walls people build when they stop seeing each other as human, and those walls had finally started to crack. Eleanor joined him again that evening holding 2 mugs of tea. She handed him one, then sat beside him. For a long while they said nothing, just listened to the quiet hum of the water. Finally, she spoke. "Do you ever think about that day?" Jordan smiled faintly. "Every now and then," he said, "but not with anger anymore. I think about how much we've all grown since then. About how one moment, one misunderstanding, somehow made us all better." Eleanor nodded, her eyes glinting with pride. "That's the beauty of life, Jordan. It breaks you open just enough to let the light in." He looked at her, smiling. "You always know what to say." "Maybe," she said softly, "but you're the one who lived it." The night deepened around them. The laughter from nearby apartments faded, replaced by the soft chirping of crickets. Jordan leaned back in his chair, looking up at the stars reflected in the water. He thought about everything: the confrontation, the regret, the apology, the healing. And for the first time, he didn't see it as a painful memory. He saw it as a turning point, not just for him, but for everyone who had been there, and even for those who had only seen it through their screens. In a world quick to judge, maybe it took one story to remind people of what really mattered: empathy, patience, and understanding. The camera of life had captured an ugly moment, yes, but it had also recorded something rare: grace. Jordan took a sip of his tea, watching the gentle ripples spread across the pool, catching the starlight. Somewhere deep inside he knew that this story, his story, wasn't just his anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been misjudged, everyone who'd ever stayed calm when it would have been easier to fight, and everyone who'd ever chosen kindness over anger. He glanced at Eleanor and smiled. "You know," he said quietly, "maybe we can't change the whole world, but we can start with our little piece of it." She nodded, her voice warm and steady. "And that's how the world changes anyway, one piece at a time." As they sat together by the water, the lights reflecting in their eyes, Magnolia Creek finally felt whole. Not perfect, but human, messy, flawed, forgiving, and real. And as the camera of imagination slowly pulled away from that peaceful scene, 2 friends sitting quietly by a pool where once tension had burned, a simple truth lingered in the air like the fading glow of sunset. Respect isn't something we give because of who someone is. It's something we owe because of who we are. The story of Magnolia Creek wasn't about division anymore. It was about redemption, grace, and the simple power of seeing each other clearly. Not as strangers, but as human beings.